Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. Today, I'm bringing in a special guest from AWS, Lakshya Kumar, and he is a solutions architect at Amazon Web Services. And we'll be talking about what he does at Amazon, what his role is, what a solutions architect really means. And we're going to be learning about Lakshya and how he came to AWS. Lakshya, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Umang. Thank you for having me here. My name is Lakshya Kumar. I've been with AWS around 2.5 years now, and I work as a solutions architect, which is sometimes a new role for people. They hear for the first time and they're very curious, okay, what do you do? So to give you some context, I work in cloud computing, which means a lot of companies who are building on this cloud industry, they have a lot of their workloads they want to deploy somewhere. They need someone they can trust and ask technical questions while they're building things. So that's
Okay.
where I fit in. My role as a solutions architect is to listen to their problems, understand what they're trying to build, give them feedback, tell them about new things that are coming out, new technology that they can build on, and some sort of like education as well. Like I learn from them, I teach them ways to build on AWS, and not only AWS, any technology that comes out. So we cannot be biased here in terms of technology. Whatever works best for them, we recommend that. And how I started off with an internship,
Okay.
which luckily I was in a good place to kind of look for positions that were in technology, but not really programming, or really not something that I would sit down in front of a computer and code the whole day. That's not something I enjoy doing. I know a lot of people do that, and it's a great part of everyone's job. But for me, it was more of, talking to people, communicating, solving problems on the go. And I started by applying and looking for positions where I saw this position, which was solutions architect intern. It said that your responsibility will be to learn and to build things on AWS cloud,
Mm,
to do certifications, and then I thought AWS is a big company, right? It's Amazon in
it's big.
general.
It's very big. Yes.
It's huge, right? So why not get started with such a big company in one of the places where you see a lot of progress, where you see a lot of, we hear about these big companies running on AWS. I was always curious what this was going to be. So I applied for the position, and the rest is history. And then I got the internship, 3 months there, came back to the full-time role, and I can definitely talk more about it. But yeah,
For
that's
sure.
the general idea. Yeah, how I got started, who I am, and yeah, I've been talking to Umang, great guy. I'm happy he's doing this as well. Very educational for people
Awesome.
out there.
So let's start with the first thing. Like, I know you said that you came across as solutions architect and you loved the role. But I want to go back in time and I want to know like where did Lakshya found his spark? Like how does one find like, hey, I am very interested in technology. Like I want to pursue a long time career. Like because for me, even when I was in school, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be in software. I loved space. But many of the young people, right, they don't know what they want to do until much later in their life, right? And there are many reasons why. So I want to know like how you found your passion. What sparked your interest in technology?
Yeah. So that's a great question. When I was younger, same as you, when I was in school, I got my hands on the first mobile device I could ever see, and then, playing around with it, installing applications on it, and then it moved from like phones to now I have a computer. Let me go use it. Let me break things and play around and see how I can, learn more of how an operating system works,
Hmm.
how, CPU works, RAM works. I got really interested in all those things. When you start off, maybe you don't know a lot about software or how things work, but this always comes in the back of your mind. You're like, oh, I use these apps. I never wondered how people build them, right? So that's where my interest grew. So I did a bachelor's in information technology, kind of like a solid foundation. What is a database? What is networking, security, all these, the basics. And then I got a job in cybersecurity. I got a cybersecurity
Mm.
consulting job, which was very interesting because it's such a fast-paced domain to be in. You're learning about attacks and risks and threats, and you think of it as if this area is very interesting, what more can I do? Like, how can I grow myself in this career? So you start talking to people, you find a mentor, they tell you more about, IT roles, consulting roles. At that time, I was lucky because my manager, when I was in the cybersecurity consulting role, my manager at that time was a solutions architect. So I had seen what solutions architects do, and they travel a lot. That's what I found out. They travel the world and they educate people, they learn, they build. And at that point, I was like, do you do a lot of coding in your role? And my manager said, no, not really. I mean, only when it's really needed. If I'm building a demo, then I'd probably use a little bit of coding. That sparked more interest in me. I was like, okay, this is a
So the
great
travel
job.
part and
The
everything
travel
else.
part and everything else that comes with it. The funny story is that I didn't actually know anything about cloud in general. Data science was hot and popular at that time, and I really wanted to get into that domain. So I kept my solutions architect interest to the side. I was like, okay, data science is the way to go. So
Yes.
I pursued my master's in information systems, and I took a lot of data science classes. That was where I would say my foundations were deeper. My understanding was more clear. I understood concepts in a way that I could actually do things, build projects. And then once I had that, I started building independent projects. I started participating in hackathons. Again, there was some sort of programming involved, but not a lot. So again, I was having fun doing what I was doing. And then to where I got the opportunity to apply for the internship, reached out to a lot of people on LinkedIn to really understand the role, people who are already in the industry as solutions architects. I reached out to them as 30-minute meetings just to understand what you do, just ask a few questions. And then, yeah, going through the internship was again, I know you have been through the job interview process, you know how nerve-wracking it can be. But it was still fine with me not knowing AWS at that point, given that I was showing determination that I will learn it on the job.
Makes sense. And that's a big thing, right? I think from my experience, having that curiosity to learn, be willing to learn, right? Especially at a young age, you can pretty much learn any topic, right? So that willingness, right? I think it's very important. If you're not willing to learn a particular topic, let's say generative AI is something that's very hard, right? And this is something that we can talk about for hours, right? If an
Yeah.
organization or an individual is not willing to use generative AI or any new technology, then they may have some problems, not immediately, but may down the line, right?
Yeah,
They
they may
can,
be missing out.
yeah, and they can lose their job, right? There have been a lot of layoffs happening. It's a very bad thing, but this is one of the reasons why as well, right? But that's probably a topic for another time for us. So I would say, like in your journey, that was one of the key moment, I would say, right? That really influenced, like, hey, I like this. That reaching out to people on LinkedIn, having that conversation, the support from your manager in that previous career, that was one of the moments that really like pushed you to like, hey, I think this is super nice.
Yeah, exactly. It's again, I feel that I am in this position at the right time as well, because cloud is growing, technology is growing, and I get the opportunity to learn whatever I want. Like I can have a breadth of knowledge across technologies, across AWS stack if I would like to, or if I want to go deeper into certain technology, let's say in this case generative AI, I can learn and research as much as I want and then become a specialist in this role. Having that kind of like freedom and flexibility of choosing your career, growing your career is what really attracted me to this position. And again, as you mentioned, like having the right support system with you, right mentors, right people who can instruct you on maybe like use LinkedIn or use podcasts like these or like YouTube videos where people are spreading the word on what this role is, because a lot of people are not sure if this role exists. They don't even know sometimes. So yeah, if you are out there who is preparing for a cloud role, you have certain experience building stuff, learning about the cloud, maybe you're thinking of doing a certification, which is again a massive step in building your expertise or domain. So yeah, I think this could be an ideal job for a lot of people.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. No, even for myself, like when I came before I came to AWS, I was reaching out to LinkedIn. I used YouTube as a platform because I didn't even know what the role of a solutions architect meant. Like, so I was able to follow some of the YouTube videos, and I connected with them, and I asked them like, hey, this is what a solutions architect means. This is what they do by watching their day-to-day life videos. So that gives me a perfect opportunity to ask you, like, can you like describe your role as a solutions architect on a daily basis, on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So for me on a day to day, actually, before I even give you the answer, I would say no 2 days are the same because every single day comes with a new challenge. So generally, this role is customer facing, and with customer facing roles, it comes with a lot of external meetings where you meet the customer. It could be an initial call where you're doing discovery, you're trying to understand, you're assessing where they are in technology stack, and then eventually you work towards building a POC or a demonstration for them, having more like architecture reviews. And then the third step would be once they are happy with what they see, how do they proceed? What are the next steps? How can we help or support them further? So I generally have those meetings early in the week where I have planning of, okay, these are the top customers we'll be talking to this week. I have those kind of meetings with my account team. I work with an account executive. They take care of the business needs of the customer. I take care of more of the technical needs. So early in the week, we have planning meetings, we have internal discussions, we set out agendas for our customer meetings, and on a daily basis, I would speak to customers. When I say customer, it could be a CTO, tech lead, engineering VP, a director of IT on the customer's end. We are having very thorough technical conversations. I do receive and send a lot of emails back and forth as well, spreading education amongst customers, or it could be answering their questions. Also, my day involves, some sort of like learning because in this role, if you're not catching up to technology, you will just lose your grip and fall behind. So you always have to constantly catch up. So what I do is I have lunchtime block, but I also block 30 minutes in my day to learn something. It could either be reading a new blog post or just opening up on the topic of generative AI, opening up, let's say, Anthropic's website and see what are the new news announcements, or opening up LinkedIn and reading some of the new ways people are building products using Gen AI. So I use that time every day and I dedicate that time in my day. Other than that, it would be, again, if I'm working on a project internally, for example, we have conferences and events, or even with our customers, we have executive briefings. So I would be working on presentations or architectures, just simply, using my time to build something and get hands-on as well. So that's typically my day to day, and every day, as I mentioned, is different. So you would see a unique challenge come out of a customer. One is probably building a data analytics pipeline. Someone else is building machine learning workflow. So you need to understand how to context switch in those situations.
And also, this responsibilities and your day to day, might depend on what team you're on, what type of customers you might be working on, because you mentioned,
Yeah.
AWS is such a large organization. AWS works with a lot of, government. It could be working with some commercial folks, right? And within commercial, there's probably different teams, different domains, like whether it's a healthcare domain, whether it's education technology domain, or whether it's healthcare or whatever. So it depends on the team. Your role might be different, right? Your day to day might be different. What
Yeah.
team are you focused on right now?
Yeah, so I work in the commercial sales segment of AWS, and I work with high priority startup customers. And these startups are generally early stage startup customers who are, building their products and they're trying to get to their first million users or first 10 million users. And they're building on AWS and they are trying to scale. Uh, and they're looking for advice on, okay, how do we ramp up without it costing us $1 million, right? They also want to be very conscious because startups are quite limited in their resources. So
Exactly.
that's why I also really like working with them because they are smart individuals. They're very intelligent about how they use the resources. They're very committed to the project that they're working on. And if I tell them something today, the evening or tomorrow, they'll have it implemented and they'll come back with more questions. It's always so fast paced that I'm also learning through them. But as you
See,
mentioned, yes, we do have other areas. There's public sector, there's healthcare, there's non-profits, education. These are big, big sectors. And usually in the SA role, you fall on other essays as well. If I'm limited in my knowledge about government or public sector information, I'll probably reach out to you and ask those questions. And you can do the same if you have questions about the startup. So it's really, I like how we have a community of essays who can chat with each other, ask questions, collaborate.
understood. And then you mentioned, your team specifically about startups, and some of them are very technical and they may have some of the problems that other sectors may not, so like budget, for example. So I think that brings them that brings a set of different challenges. So I want to ask you, what are some of the key challenges and responsibilities that you may face in your role in this particular team as an SA?
Yeah, some of the challenges I would say is number one, communication is key in this role. You're always communicating from the customer to the service teams, communicating with your sales folks. So setting expectations and setting kind of like agendas, it's crucial. So it could be challenging if you have, let's say, a sales folk you're working with, let's say an account executive, and then they are not aligned on the same track as you. Let's say, for example, in my technology perspective, I think solution A makes more sense. But for the sales folks, let's say the solution B makes more sense. So there's always this kind of conflict that you kind of like resolving those. Other than that, I would say from the customers, they're always learning and building and breaking our services. That comes with its own unique challenge. But it's really interesting to see them build and scale. And always, I mean, there are 250 plus services. So there are definitely services that I'm not too deep in. I don't know them 100%. So those times I would take some questions from the customer, reach out to a specialist, find one, and then we can, think again and bring on the specialist for further clarification. So those are some of the unique challenges. The other thing is the time. Everything takes up time, and then you have to make sure that you have a good amount of time for other activities. Like I do mentoring, I study for my certification, try and write blogs and work on, improving my interpersonal skills. So making and dedicating time for those is always crucial. So those are some of the challenges. And I would love to hear your answer on this too. Like what are some of the challenges you see among in this role?
Yeah, I think so far for me, I think it's always about managing time. I think you said, working with customers, and especially if it's a startup type of customer, for them, time, getting back with an answer, especially with 200 plus services. I don't know one 99th service. And for them, that might be the service that's super useful, right? So for
Yeah.
me, one, staying up to date with technology and, learning about it, right? And two, if I don't know whether or not that service or that person or specialist may help them, I need to follow up on that topic as soon as possible and relate that message. Or that's when you brought up communication, right? Communicate with that customer with that response, because for them it might be mission critical, right? So I think that is something that I learned when I came to AWS. I thought, it's okay, I have time, but again, we're moving at a very fast speed. So doing, learning the best, learning so much in a short amount of time, and talking, not saying, not losing trust. Because sometimes, you may want to guess the answer, by not thinking through fully, right? You don't want to do that. And for us, I think as a solutions architect, I think that's very important. It's like an architect, like for a building, right? For me, if I don't think about the physics, 5 years from now on, 10 years from now on, right? If I don't have the foundations well, um, I may have not thought about tornadoes in Florida, and that could break things, right? That could take down a building. So I think
Yes,
thinking in all angles, and I think at AWS we have this, not just AWS, but any other organization, they would have some best practices, and they would have mentoring, right? So taking help of that definitely helps in providing the right solutions for the customers.
exactly. Yeah, and I also think of essays or solutions architects as visionary. Like you're thinking beyond just short term for the customer. So whenever we suggest a solution, it doesn't, have to be components that make sense right now, but in the next few years or
Exactly.
so, they don't make sense. So yeah, obviously we have to consider all of those things, look at things from an bird's eye view, make those decisions. And the one advice I was given by my mentor when I joined Amazon was, if you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know. Don't bluff, don't give wrong answers. It's okay to say, I don't know, and then but it's not okay to not follow back. It's okay to take those questions for later, do your research and get back.
Yeah, totally. And that's what differentiates, the role of a solutions architect, when you compare that with, let's say, a software development engineer, right? Um, so on that note, like, what are some of those technical and soft skills that you think are essential for to be successful as a solutions architect? And there's a follow-up on this as well. So meaning, what skills did you have before, and what do you have right now? So like, what did you gain after you became an SA?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm pretty sure a lot of folks would like to hear the answer to this. So I've seen essays come from all kinds of backgrounds. Some of them didn't have an IT background, but they, went through a boot camp, got their basics, got the foundations, got the certifications, then ended up in the SA job. My story is a little different, so I can share my perspective on this. I have been in an IT job. I've had a corporate IT job before, so I didn't know what kind of things I need to know, at least to stay, or at least get a job in IT. Some of those fundamentals are like, what are databases, what is networking, and how do these things work? Not to a level where you are the expert or the most skilled, but at least have a foundation of, if you are able to explain how a website works, how, what happens in the background when you type in www.amazon.com. If you know those details, that's really good. You're in good shape to answer some of these technical questions. The other thing, as I mentioned, like from my master's program, I got a lot of understanding into data science and what machine learning really is. And I was able to build those projects. So some of the common frameworks that I used there was Python is a popular programming language. So I picked up on how to understand Python code and write a little bit of it as well if I'm writing machine learning code as well. Learning what are the popular frameworks like TensorFlow, PyTorch, more on the machine learning side. As I mentioned, like my interest was over there. In cybersecurity, when I worked in the past, I understood what IAM was, or security in general, what that means. And why is that important? What is authentication versus what is authorization? So these kind of like small technology nuances, if you are able to set up your foundation and build your foundation and do certifications, as I mentioned again, the solutions architect associate covered some of these foundation services, like what is EC2, what is 3, and why are they used, and why would you choose to use them over other services. So if you have those kind of like details with you, that kind of background, you would be, I would say you can ramp up to the other technology within this role. And I was lucky enough to have this before I came in into the internship. And then at the internship level itself, we have resources internally where you can learn, watch videos, or you can build things. I learned a lot from building hands-on. So I went into the AWS consoles, spun up a few services, tried to play around with them, and then followed a few workshops along as well. So that would be, I would say, a good space to be in. And again, there is so much to learn, so much to cover. It depends on what your personal interest is in. If there's a certain technology that makes more sense to you, you can pick that domain in, find the right people, find the right videos or training programs, and then participate in them.
Yeah, that's great. And then on that note as well, For myself, like, I know I've used several YouTube videos. I've, subscribed to like Cloud Guru and other, digital courses that were available for paid subscriptions and even practice exams, right? I think those were some of the videos, resources that I've used, and I think you used some of the similar right ones, right?
Yeah.
Were there any other resources or any learning path that you would recommend or that have helped you in your journey to getting the internship or building that towards your full-time role as an SA?
Yeah. So one of the things I really liked was GitHub already has a few projects that are, it just says that these are early career graduate projects that you can build on your own. You can build like a portfolio website hosted on AWS, or you can maybe just build a simple machine learning pipeline, or it could be just, a simple ETL pipeline, something like that, something small to start with. So GitHub was really helpful there. The other thing I would recommend is Udemy has a lot of courses, and they also have, PDFs or PPTs if you're trying to like go through them, brush through them very quickly. That was really helpful for me. And again, as you mentioned, like some of these popular Invis Labs was one to play around with labs, or I'll have to look for a few more like the skill builder, but there are so many resources out there, and also LinkedIn. If you can read up on a blog or an article, that would really help you get started. And once you build a small project, you can always learn how to improve it. So maybe use some other technology next time, improve upon it, build more features into it, and then you can add it to your portfolio. So building a GitHub body of work is very, I would say, a very smart move.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And as you were sharing that GitHub thing, I think that's an amazing, amazing idea. I wish I had known that. I remember from my interview experience, the interviewer, right, would often ask you to, solve a problem. And I think looking back at it, I think one of the best way to impress them is to show them that you know AWS in and out. And the best way to do that is to find a particular problem, and hopefully it's AWS services related. You can talk to them in using some of the, I think STAR method is one of the best methods, right, to describe that, right? And
Yes.
so if you can incorporate, pick a real world problem and solve that problem using this GitHub or AWS services and explain them clearly to your interviewer, I think your interviewer will be amazed by it.
Exactly, exactly. And in my interview, and I can share a little bit about this, I was asked projects that I worked on, and those projects were on my resume and on my GitHub. So I'm pretty sure whenever someone is asking you that question, they do a little bit of research, background check on you, on what kind of projects you worked on, and then they ask you deeper questions to a level where they can see, okay, so you built it yourself and you know the ins and outs, how you would improve this, how this works currently. And always, as I mentioned, like when you're building anything, even a small piece of a project that you're building, always think of how can I make it, like how can I add a README so that I can describe it.
Mm.
As you mentioned, when you're talking to an interviewer, you're describing your project in a star format, and the result matters. The R in the star, the results, it really matters because that is when they will ask you, okay, how can you improve it? What are the next steps? If you were to do it again from scratch, how would you build this? So those are key things to remember. And again, I think you are sharing this with folks, so people who are interested, who are learning about this role, they can reach out to folks on LinkedIn and they can share more information as well.
Yeah, I was about to just mention that, if the listeners wanted to connect with you or follow your work, I would, connect with you later on, include the links to your LinkedIn
Yes.
and your GitHub so that they can connect with you as well. And on this note, like, have you seen, and you work with a lot of startup customers, like, have you seen uh, some of the services or AWS services more particularly that have transformed, in a way, uh, this businesses and solve those real world problems? Like,
I would say, yeah. So there are a few services that I have more conversations about now. One of them is Amazon Bedrock, the simplest place for you to build your generative AI applications. So a lot of customers are looking for that, I want a choice of foundation models because every single use case demands for a different kind of foundation model. So they're looking for a very simple way to get started. So I do have a lot of conversations about Amazon Bedrock, its capabilities, and recently there were some new features announced, new models that were launched. So my customers were very interested. How do we get access to this? How do I start building? So it's my job as an SA to stay updated and then also inform them on how they can get started. That was one. The other one I've seen a lot of interest is again SageMaker, the machine learning platform. So a lot of customers get interested in building their own sort of like machine learning models or training their models. So that's where I see a lot of interest peak in as well. And there are services, the core services are easy. I do have conversations on how to cost optimize them, how to
Mm.
even improve the architecture for resilience or improve any kind of like frameworks that they currently are using within those services. Yeah, those discussions usually do happen. And then, as you mentioned, there's one off service that's like the 195th service. So I'll take that back and get the more information later on.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask this question is for the people that either don't know about AWS or want to break into tech and want to break into AWS, right? Um, they could take this service, this Amazon Bedrock service, which you have a lot of conversations around, right? Hopefully they can go on Amazon's GitHub or any other search for Amazon Bedrock and type in GitHub. They can build a project around Bedrock and choose a problem they can solve with the use of this service, right? Hopefully that project, if they can solve it and follow the method and best practices like README files and explain that very well, that should show your interviewer that, hey, I know the service, I am up to date on the technology, the latest service that the job that I'm applying at, the organization that I'm applying at, right?
Yeah.
I'm up to date, I can solve it, I know how to build solutions on it, so I know what a solutions architect does. That should really impress your interviewer. So I think that's what I was getting at. So
Yeah.
hopefully if you're watching, do that right now. And so one of the other thing I want to know is with that Gen AI talk, right? Gen AI is transforming every single role, every single industry, like healthcare, I don't know, space, uh, teachers, right? So for a solutions architect, how do you see that evolving with the use of Gen AI?
That's a really good question and quite interesting because I was thinking of this and speaking to someone else as well within AWS on how can we utilize generative AI within our roles every day. And the feedback I got from them was we do a lot of writing as well. Once you get into this position where you have to document things that you're building, maybe you're reviewing someone's architecture, and then you need some help writing things out and giving feedback. That's where content generation using generative AI can help you. So we do have internal, you might be familiar, we have internal applications that we can utilize. The only key thing to remember is use them responsibly. Obviously, you can't share customer content or confidential information with generative AI, even chatbots or any applications. So keeping that in mind, I feel like consider our role, utilizing it for our day-to-day activities can be useful, automate some of the processes. Even thinking about like researching about a certain technology or doing some sort of like, can you summarize this blog post for me so that I
Mm.
can consume it easily? Save some of your time as well. So those are some of the ways I feel like we can apply the technology well, but learning and building on generative AI is also, as an essay, I'm learning more and more about what's lying underneath these models and why do they
Mm.
work the way they do and how do they function this well. So I'm trying to like dig into the layers and try to understand this technology myself so that I can utilize it better.
Yeah, I think, and as a solutions architect, I think you have to, right? Because you would be working with this service, and you would be recommending that service, as part of a solution to a customer. And if you don't know how it works in depth, like you talked broad about responsible AI. If you don't know how that works, if the model is going to save the data or not, whether or not this model, from choice of models that we have at Amazon,
Yeah.
recommending that model to a customer, if you don't really know like how they work, right? Then you just can't recommend them to a customer. So I think that's part of a job as a solutions architect is to really understand the tech behind it, really understand the customer, their needs, their requirements. So I think, and that I think comes with practice, but just
Yeah.
as a solutions architect, if you are aspiring to be I think a solutions architect, that is something that you should be uh, getting ready to be comfortable at, I think, right? Um, and so this may sound like a demanding role because there's so much more that we talked about, tons of services, staying on top of technology, and then still learning about, you know, Gen AI and whatnot. And then not just the breadth, but also depth of certain services, right? So this may sound demanding to a lot of viewers right here. So how do you manage your work-life balance? Um,
Yeah. Great question. As we just put it, there is quite a lot into the role. But again, to think of it, are you having fun doing all this? To me, the answer is yes. That's why I got into the role the very first time. I enjoy having this conversation. I enjoy learning these new things and staying on top of, the new technologies that come out. How do I balance things? I would say have appropriate blockers in your day. As I mentioned, learning time is learning time. I wouldn't dedicate it to reading emails or Slack messages at that time. Uh, or when you are going out of office, ensure that you're not working, leave your laptop at home. And then, my manager and my team is very supportive in that. If I am going out of office, or if I do need some time off, I can have either someone else take up my responsibility, inform the sales representatives that can you maybe collect all the information when I come back, I can, respond to those kind of things. So there's again, communication is very important here. You communicate with the people. If there's too much on your plate, you learn how to say no. You learn how to respectfully say no. And also, there are other things I want to do. As I mentioned, like I want to do more certifications, build that area of depth. So you find the right people to accelerate that process, who have done this before, mentors or people in the industry who have maybe spent 10, 15 years building AIML projects. They'll guide you better than someone who's just starting out on their own from scratch. So those are some of the things you can do. And again, using generative AI in some of the things that we do. Maybe if you want to write a generic email, use some of the content generation features, save some of your time, and a lot of, managing your tasks efficiently using tools. I don't know if I can talk about them, but there are some of the tools like this Asana that's quite popular. This Notion, good for productivity. You can take notes, make lists, create project boards and prioritizes. There's a concept within the IT industry of you prioritizing the tasks based on their urgency, the priority, and how you can handle them. So all of those, when you plug them in, that's how I manage to save time and have a good work-life company.
That's awesome. I think that's very well said, you know. Even I often sometimes struggle with work-life balance, but establishing those clear boundaries and being efficient as much as possible. And we have at the tips of our finger Gen AI, right? So
Yes.
use it and try to be more efficient, save time. Uh, I think that's the best way to manage your work-life balance, I think. And then one thing I want to ask you is, do you have any final thoughts or advice for some of the listeners, who would be interested in pursuing career in this technology or AWS?
Yeah. Generally, I recommend, just taking it one at a time, one step at a time, right? Starting out small, building things out, learning. It's okay to make mistakes and maybe lose some of the progress as long as you are okay to bounce back and kind of like learn new things that are coming out. I would say there are definitely moments where I feel, okay, do I know enough to be a solutions architect? Am I on the right team in the right position? But I get the confidence from speaking to other SAs, understanding how do I grow in a certain area where I'm weak. So I do like a session on Fridays when it's a little lighter with customer workload. I do a session with one of the SAs where we just talk about our certifications, how things are going. top challenges in the week. So it's like a mentoring session where I'm getting to learn, I'm able to share what my week was like, and I learn something new. We talk about technology. Sometimes we don't talk about technology. We just, as you and I talk, we sometimes talk about work, sometimes we don't. So that really also helps. So I would say someone who's starting off, build a good network, find people on LinkedIn who are solutions architects or in similar cloud roles. See what are the responsibilities in, let's say, a job description that you're applying to, and see what kind of technologies you need to target. If it says you need to learn about cloud technology, then start building those labs and projects, as I mentioned. If it says it's a lot more focused on the business side of things, then find the right kind of courses or training programs that can help you build those. Because this is a sales role, essentially, it's a tech sales role. But at the end of the day, you do need to understand a little bit on the sales process and the business, how those things work as well. So again, start out small, start out slow, build your network, build your connections, and then start applying and then seek guidance and learn. That's pretty much how I would prefer.
Yep. No, I think that's very well said. One thing I want to call out in here is it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to lose track for a while, but the biggest point in here is to bounce back, come back. Try to be consistent as much as possible. No, I think that's very useful. Thank you so much, Lakshya. I think it was wonderful having you. Um, if there are any topics that our viewers want to have, would love to bring you back in here and explain and mentor and provide tips and guidance for how to actually break into AWS. How what exactly did you do, like your resume, what projects did you do? So we would love to talk more about that at a later time. Thank you so much.